Alright guys, who broke the robot?
Hello everyone, I'm a broken robot. I hope you all are having a great day. When you think of the greatest moments in gaming history, what comes to mind? Maybe thoughts of Mario defeating Bowser in his own castle, or maybe even Sonic delivering that final blow to Dr. Eggman's mech suit. But overall, I think it's safe to say that some of the greatest parts of gaming are defeating that final boss. Your final test of skill, your rite of passage. Your ability to say, I beat the game, lies behind that final boss. Even in the modern gaming landscape, with bosses no longer being a key element to gameplay, bosses still reign supreme in titles like Final Fantasy and Dark Souls. But let me ask you a question, my dear viewer. What happens when an entire game is based around boss battles? One game that's like this is Cuphead from 2015. While it's been firmly documented by fellow YouTubers that Cuphead is easily one of the greatest games of the 2010s, one key aspect that I think many fans overlook is how the game devs may have accidentally crafted the greatest boss in terms of design, story, and challenge. To answer my own question from earlier, what happens when you make an entire game based around boss battles? Well, my dear viewer, you have to make sure that that final boss makes the other bosses look like a pushover. King Dice, in terms of Cuphead's gameplay and lore, is easily the greatest antagonist in the entire game, making his own employer, the devil himself, look like chopped liver. Unlike in other games where the final bosses are slowly revealed, Cuphead does the exact opposite. From the start, King Dice is established as the devil's right-hand man and his equal. King Dice is a very classy character, almost to a point of uneasy tension following him around wherever he goes. Also, before I go any further, I just want to make one thing abundantly clear for this video. We are strictly talking about the in-game King Dice, and not the Cuphead Netflix show King Dice, because, well...
Look how they massacred my boy.
When Cuphead and Mugman are kicked out of the Devil's Casino, it's King Dice that gives them orders and overlooks their work as they slowly collect soul contracts from the Devil's various debtors. At the end of Aisle 1, when King Dice is pleased by your ability to gather up a handful of soul contracts, it's safe to say that I think at this point King Dice is less than impressed with your work. When comparing King Dice to the various bosses of Aisle 1, it's safe to say that these were pushovers in comparison. The debtors that King Dice was too lazy to go after himself or even send his various henchmen after. This short interaction between our heroes and King Dice at the end of Aisle 1 not only shows that Dice is aware of his own abilities, but isn't impressed by such feats as taking out entire bands of criminals or eliminating rival businesses of the devil. When Cuphead and Mugman finally defeat all the bosses at the end of Inkwell Isle 2, the interaction between our heroes and King Dice changes significantly. King Dice not only greets our heroes with both enthusiasm and with an impressed disposition, but I think it's safe to say that the bosses of Inkwell Isle 2 are no joke, with some of them being extremely difficult. While I think it's safe to say that King Dice could still take out most of these bosses, maybe with just a little bit of elbow grease, I think that by this point in the story he no longer sees the cups as cannon fodder for the devil to throw at his enemies, but possibly a legitimate asset for the devil to use. Shortly after letting the cups enter Inkwell Isle 3, King Dice meets with the devil back at his casino to report on the cups. While the devil couldn't care less and is just glad that his debtors are finally paying up their souls, King Dice is more cautious. King Dice has personally seen their progress and how with each debtor subdued they grow stronger. While the runaway debtors of Inkwell Isles 1 and 2 were just too out of the way to be bothered with, the bosses of Inkwell Isle 3 are some of the toughest individuals in the Cuphead universe, meaning that they in theory were either an equal or a threat to King Dice, or even the devil himself. If their contracts weren't collected despite their close proximity to the devil's home turf, it can only mean that they were a threat. While doing some research for this video, I saw that online some saw this as a sign that King Dice was afraid of the cups, but in reality I think he's just being realistic. The Cuphead universe is home to a host of powerful and strange beings, so King Dice is simply being cautious to help protect his status on Inkwell Isle. The devil might have more raw power than King Dice, but in terms of logistical thinking, King Dice makes all of the right moves. While Cuphead and Mugman are wiping the floor with the debtors the devil was too lazy or worried to go after himself, he leisurely counts his money, he smokes his cigars. all while King Dice sees a threat to his organization and he rounds up as many henchmen as possible and prepares for a potential battle. King Dice has not survived this long as the manager of the Devil's Casino through luck. He's done it through sheer skill and using his suave persona to outwit his enemies. When Cuphead and Mugman finally approach the casino with all the soul contracts, King Dice springs his plan into action. King Dice gathered together himself and 9 of his best henchmen to stop our heroes from reaching the devil and threatening him. King Dice's henchmen aren't very important to the overall character story of King Dice, but they do help show the kinds of people King Dice does surround himself with while running the devil's criminal operations. The Tipsy Troupe is a group of 3 drunken alcoholic beverages that appear on the boss fight with King Dice when you land on Space 1. Their names are Romulus, Ol Ethan, and Jeanette. While these 3 might be the first henchmen that King Dice throws at Cuphead and Mugman, don't let that fool you. These 3 can pack a punch with 3 different attacks that make it very difficult to dodge. Chips Bedigan appears in the King Dice boss fight when landing on Space 2. He appears in an oversized board that resembles a chipboard, but he is by far the easiest of the 9 henchmen and can be seen falling to literal pieces among defeat. Overall, most players try to land on Space 2 thanks to this easy mini-boss. Mr. Wheezy is a giant cigar that appears in the boss fight with King Dice when landing on Space 3. He is fought on 2 ashtrays which act as platforms. Mr. Wheezy has a difficult attack pattern, and flying cigarettes only add to more attacks that you have to dodge, making him one of the more difficult henchmen to take out. Personally, Mr. Wheezy is my favorite of the 9 King Dice henchmen. Pip and Dot appear in the King Dice boss battle when landing on Space 4. While they aren't strong in terms of attacks or HP count, the arena they fight in takes place in a long moving platform with spikes and all kinds of moving objects that you have to dodge. Many players will underestimate this mini-boss and they'll lose plenty of hit points on this boss, causing them to lose the fight altogether. Hoppus Pocus is a mini-boss that appears in the boss fight with King Dice when landing on Space 5. Hoppus has multiple different attacks, with some being almost impossible to dodge, guaranteeing at least 1 loss of health points while fighting him. Many players will often try to avoid Space 5 at all costs to avoid these attacks. Fairlap is the henchman that appears when landing on Space 6. He is fought with the airplane above a horse racing track. Fair himself is a relatively simple boss with easy to dodge attacks. However, thanks to the arena's ability to block the screen mid-battle, you'll often accidentally get hit because you couldn't see the attacks coming. Piruletta is the henchman that appears on Space 7. A combination of fast-moving physical attacks with hard-to-dodge range attacks make this ex-Russian mob enforcer nothing to laugh at. Many players often have to avoid this space altogether to avoid some cheap hits. Mangustine is the henchman that appears on Space 8. This 8-ball from hell not only has ranged attacks, but has his own henchman that will chase you around the arena mid-fight, leading to our heroes having to dodge multiple attacks at once. Thanks to Mangustine's high HP count, many players will often spend the most time in the entire King Dice boss battle on this henchman. Mr. Chimes is the final henchman that you can encounter before fighting King Dice himself. His stage is set inside a claw machine with the airplane. This henchman, unlike the others, challenges the Cups to a game of Match 2 in order to help even the power gap that has now formed between King Dice's henchmen and Cuphead and Mugman. But at this late stage in the game, it really doesn't matter at this point. It's never made exactly clear why King Dice fights tooth and nail for the casino, but it's safe to assume that thanks to King Dice's loyalty to his boss and the pride that he takes in his casino, he was never going to pull any punches from the start. Upon starting the fight with King Dice and his henchmen, you're shown a bar with free spaces and numbers counting up 1 to 9. Each number represents a different henchman that you could potentially fight, and most likely you'll have to fight through most of them. This boss battle perfectly highlights King Dice's obsession with gambling and luck. It's also important to note that at any moment King Dice could have just sent all 9 of his henchmen in at once or gotten involved personally, but he doesn't. It's also important to note that while playing in this game, there are safe spaces and even spaces that can grant the Cups health boosts. While the odds are certainly stacked against Cuphead and Mugman, at no point does King Dice make things so unfair that it's overkill. This perfectly highlights how even though King Dice is a cutthroat crime boss that runs a casino for the literal devil, he does believe in a gentleman's duel. As you fight your way through King Dice's henchmen, you can see King Dice's brutality on full display. An example of this is upon defeating Mr. Wheezy, one of King Dice's henchmen, you can see Dice personally deliver the final blow, killing his own henchman to avoid any chips in his pride. Additionally, the more of his henchmen you defeat, the faster the die you use to progress across the board spins faster, and is more unpredictable. When you finally do clear through Dice's henchmen, he doesn't even bother giving you a chance to catch your breath. Right there and then he begins to attack you with legions of playing cards. King Dice as a boss is very difficult to defeat. Not only are you likely already weakened by his henchmen before you, but his hitbox is located in a space of the screen that is very difficult to aim at while parrying. Luckily for you though, as the player, King Dice's HP is actually very low when compared to the other bosses in Cuphead. Upon finally defeating King Dice, the Devil's Casino is knocked out of operation, and all that's left in your way is the Devil, who compared to King Dice is a complete pushover. King Dice is an amazing villain because not only does he show all the characteristics of a competent antagonist, but he also has the power to back it up. My only gripe with King Dice is that his boss battle is arguably far more difficult than the battle with the Devil, almost making it feel anticlimactic when you go from the harder secondary final boss to the easier true final boss. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is my analysis of King Dice from Cuphead. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. We're working hard to grow the channel. I hope you all have a great day, drink some water, and stay cool.